He brought his pregnant mistress home. She has no roof, Donald said, standing in my kitchen with this woman beside him. Be a Christian. That smile on his face would cost him everything he had.
Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching.
Her name was Crystal Dawson, 29 years old, blonde hair that came from a bottle, and a belly that pushed against her cheap sundress. She looked at me with a mix of defiance and fear, like she expected me to throw something at her. I didn't throw anything. I smiled. Of course, I said. The guest room is upstairs. Let me get you some fresh towels. Donald's eyebrows went up. He'd expected screaming. He'd expected tears. He'd prepared his whole speech about Christian forgiveness and marital duty. Instead, I walked to the linen closet and pulled out the good towels, the ones I saved for company. Ruth, he said, following me into the hallway. You understand the situation? I understand perfectly. This young woman needs a place to stay. We have a guest room. It's the Christian thing to do. He studied my face, looking for the crack. For 44 years, I'd been his wife. For 44 years, I'd cooked his meals and washed his clothes and pretended not to notice when he came home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. Donald thought he knew me. He thought I was the same woman he'd married in 1980, the quiet girl from the church choir who'd never raised her voice. He was wrong. Well, he said slowly, that's very mature of you, Ruth. I'm 64 years old. I've had time to learn maturity. I showed Crystal to the guest room. It was Jeremy's old room, our son's. Unchanged since he'd left for college 20 years ago. The baseball trophies were still on the shelf. The poster of some rock band was still on the wall. Crystal looked around like she was appraising the place for value. The bathroom is across the hall, I said. Dinner is at 6. Do you have any dietary restrictions? I'm pregnant, she said, as if I hadn't noticed. I need protein. I'll make sure there's plenty of protein. I left her there and went downstairs. Donald was in the living room, on the phone with someone. I heard him laugh, low and mean. You should have seen her face, he said. Not a single tear. I think she's finally given up. Took 44 years, but I finally broke her. I walked past him to the kitchen. The dinner wouldn't make itself. That first night, I served pot roast with potatoes and green beans. Crystal ate like she hadn't seen food in days. Donald watched me across the table, waiting for some sign of distress. I gave him nothing. This is delicious, Mrs. Coleman, Crystal said. Thank you, dear. And please call me Ruth. Donald's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and smirked. My buddies want to know how you're holding up, he said to me. They bet you'd have a breakdown by now. Your buddies should mind their own business. They're just curious. Not every woman would take this so well. I'm not every woman. After dinner, I cleared the dishes while Donald and Crystal watched television in the living room. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, not touching, but the intimacy was there in the way she looked at him, the way he looked back. I washed the dishes by hand, even though we had a dishwasher. The hot water felt good on my skin. The repetitive motion calmed my mind. I had a lot of planning to do. The thing about Donald was that he'd always underestimated me. When we got married, I was 20 years old and he was 22. He had a job at the factory and big plans for the future. I had a high school diploma and a talent for keeping quiet. But quiet isn't the same as stupid, and patience isn't the same as weakness. For 44 years, I'd watched Donald make decisions, bad decisions mostly. He'd invested our savings in a car dealership that went bankrupt. He'd loaned money to friends who never paid it back. He'd bought toys he couldn't afford and charged vacations we didn't take. Through all of it, I'd kept my mouth shut. I'd balanced the checkbook and paid the bills and made sure we didn't lose the house that my parents had left me, the house that was in my name alone. Donald didn't know that. He thought when we got married, everything became his. He'd never looked at the deed, never questioned why I handled all the paperwork. He just assumed, the way he always assumed, that the world would arrange itself to his liking. 3 months ago, I'd hired a lawyer, Thomas Wright, from a firm in Nashville. I'd found him through Helen Price, my best friend since kindergarten, the only person who knew what I was planning. Are you sure about this? Helen had asked. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The first step had been the house. I'd listed it quietly, through Thomas's connections, to a family from Atlanta who were relocating for work. The Wrights, as it happened. Thomas's own brother and sister-in-law. They'd offered $425,000, cash, no contingencies. I'd accepted. The closing had happened 2 weeks ago. I'd signed the papers in Thomas's office while Donald was at his weekly poker game. The money was sitting in an account he didn't know existed, at a bank he'd never heard of. The second step was the joint account. For decades, Donald had squirreled away money from his pension, his side jobs, his various schemes. He thought he was clever, keeping a separate savings account for emergencies. He didn't know that I'd been watching, that I had the account number, the password, everything. Yesterday, while he was picking up Crystal from wherever he'd been keeping her, I'd transferred $127,000 to my new account. The one in my name only. The one he would never find. Donald Coleman thought he was bringing his mistress home to humiliate his wife. He thought he was showing her who was boss, proving that she'd tolerate anything rather than be alone. He didn't realize that he'd just walked into a trap. The second day, Crystal decided she wanted breakfast in bed. She called down from the guest room at 7:30, her voice high and demanding. Ruth, I'm not feeling well. Could you bring up some toast and tea? I made the toast. I brewed the tea. I arranged it nicely on a tray with a cloth napkin and a small vase with a flower from the garden. You're spoiling her, Donald said, watching me work. She's pregnant. Pregnant women need to be comfortable. You weren't this comfortable when you were pregnant with Jeremy. Times change. I carried the tray upstairs. Crystal was sitting up in bed, scrolling through her phone, looking bored and entitled. She barely glanced at me when I set the tray on the nightstand. The tea is too hot, she said after one sip. I'll bring ice. And the toast is dry. Don't you have any jam? I'll bring jam. I went back downstairs. Donald was on the phone again, laughing with his friends. She's bringing her breakfast in bed, he said. I told you she's completely broken. Won't even fight back. I got the ice. I got the jam. I brought them upstairs with the same pleasant smile I'd been wearing for 2 days. Here you are, dear. Anything else? Crystal looked at me with something like contempt. You know this is your husband's baby, right? So he tells me. And you're just okay with that? Serving me like some kind of maid? I sat down on the edge of the bed. Crystal tensed, like she expected me to finally explode. Instead, I folded my hands in my lap. Let me tell you something, Crystal. I've been married to Donald for 44 years. I know exactly who he is. I know about the affairs, the lies, the money he's wasted. I know about the time he promised me a trip to Hawaii and then spent the savings on a boat he never used. Then why are you still with him? Because I'm not stupid. Because I've been waiting for the right moment. And because I've learned that the best revenge isn't screaming and throwing things. The best revenge is patience. Crystal stared at me. For a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear, maybe. Or recognition. What does that mean? It means enjoy your breakfast, dear. You only have a few more days to enjoy it. I left her with her toast and jam. She didn't ask for anything else that morning. By day 3, Donald had started to relax. He'd invited his poker buddies over to show off his arrangement. 4 men in their 60s, sitting around my dining room table, drinking my beer and eating my chips, while Crystal sat in the corner like a trophy. Ruth doesn't mind at all, Donald told them. She's been a perfect hostess. I don't believe it, said Frank, his oldest friend. Any woman would mind. Not Ruth. She knows her place. I came in with more beer. The men went quiet, watching me. I set the bottles on the table and smiled at each of them. Can I get you gentlemen anything else? See? Donald said. What did I tell you? I went back to the kitchen. Through the door, I could hear them laughing, talking about me like I wasn't there, like I was furniture. She's probably planning something, one of them said. Women always are. Ruth? Plan something? Donald laughed. She doesn't have the imagination or the spine. I washed the glasses that had piled up in the sink. 4 more days. That's all I needed. 4 more days of smiling and serving and pretending to be the broken wife they all thought I was. On the counter, my phone buzzed. A text from Thomas Wright. Everything is on schedule. Family arrives Sunday morning, 9 a.m. I deleted the message and went back to being invisible. Day 4 brought a new level of humiliation. Donald had discovered speakerphone. I was in the kitchen making lunch when I heard his voice boom from the living room. He was talking to his brother, Carl, who lived in Florida and hadn't visited in years. You should see her, Carl. She's walking around like nothing happened. Makes breakfast, makes dinner, even does Crystal's laundry. It's pathetic. I kept chopping vegetables. The knife hit the cutting board with steady, rhythmic strokes. I'm telling you, 44 years of marriage, and I finally found her breaking point. There isn't one. The woman has no spine. Crystal giggled in the background. I heard her say something about how lucky Donald was to have such an understanding wife. Understanding? Donald laughed. She's not understanding. She's defeated. There's a difference. I set down the knife and walked to the doorway. Donald was sprawled on the couch with Crystal beside him, his phone on the coffee table broadcasting to the whole room. Lunch will be ready in 20 minutes, I said. Would you like iced tea or lemonade? Donald looked at me with a mix of confusion and triumph. See, Carl, what did I tell you? That's just eerie. Carl's voice crackled from the phone. She should be throwing things. Ruth doesn't throw things. Ruth doesn't do anything. That's why I had to find some excitement elsewhere. He patted Crystal's belly. And look what I found. I went back to the kitchen. The vegetables were waiting. The knife was waiting. And so was Sunday. That afternoon, Helen came over. She was the only friend I'd told about my plan, and even she didn't know all the details. She sat at my kitchen table while Crystal napped upstairs and Donald watched some game on television. How are you holding up? Helen asked. Better than they think. I saw Crystal at the grocery store yesterday. She was buying pregnancy vitamins on Donald's credit card. The girl has nerve. She'll need more than nerve when this is over. Helen studied me. We'd been friends for 60 years. Since we were both 4 years old and our mothers put us in the same Sunday school class. She knew me better than anyone, even better than Donald after 44 years. Ruth, what exactly are you planning? Justice. That's not an answer. I leaned closer. The house is sold, Helen. The money is in an account Donald doesn't know about. On Sunday morning, the new owners are coming to take possession. What happens to Donald? Donald will have to find somewhere else to live, and so will his pregnant girlfriend. Helen's eyes went wide. You're throwing him out? After all these years? He brought another woman into my home, Helen. He's been parading her around like a prize. He's been calling his friends to laugh at me. So yes, I'm throwing him out, but I'm doing it my way. What about the baby? If it's really his, then he can figure out child support from whatever apartment he ends up in. That's not my problem anymore. Helen sat back in her chair. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then a slow smile spread across her face. Ruth Coleman, I have known you for 60 years, and I have never been prouder of you than I am right now. Save the pride for Sunday. That's when the real show begins. Day 5, Crystal started making demands. This room is too small, she announced at breakfast. I need more space for when the baby comes. Donald nodded like this was perfectly reasonable. What do you suggest? The master bedroom is bigger, and it has that nice bathroom with the bathtub. I set down my coffee cup. You want my bedroom? Our bedroom, Donald corrected. And Crystal has a point. She's pregnant. She needs comfort. And where would I sleep? The guest room. It's only fair. I looked at my husband of 44 years, the man I'd married when we were both young and foolish. The man who'd promised to love and cherish me until death do us part. Now he was asking me to give up my bedroom to his pregnant mistress. Of course, I said. I'll move my things this afternoon. Crystal smiled. Donald smiled. Neither of them saw the way my hands were shaking under the table. I spent that afternoon moving my clothes and personal items into Jeremy's old room, the room where my son had grown up. The room where I'd sat with him countless nights, helping with homework, listening to his problems, being a mother. Jeremy hadn't spoken to Donald in 5 years, not since he'd discovered, through a careless comment from one of Donald's friends, that his father had been cheating for most of Jeremy's childhood. The affair with Crystal wasn't the first. It wasn't even the 5th. I found an old photo album in the closet while I was making space for my things. Pictures of Jeremy as a baby. Pictures of him at Little League, at graduation, at his wedding. His father was in some of the photos, smiling like he was a good man, like he was a good husband and father. Lies. All of it lies. I put the album in my suitcase. The suitcase I'd already packed for Sunday, hidden in the back of the closet where Donald would never look. That evening, I made dinner as usual. Roast chicken with mashed potatoes and gravy. Crystal's favorite, apparently, though I suspected she'd never had a real home-cooked meal before Donald found her. "This is amazing," Crystal said, shoveling food into her mouth. "You're such a good cook, Ruth." "Thank you, dear. I don't know how to cook at all. My mom never taught me." "Perhaps you should learn, especially with a baby on the way." Crystal shrugged. "Donald said he'd hire someone, a nanny and a cook. Once we're settled." I looked at Donald. "Once you're settled?" "I've been thinking," Donald said, leaning back in his chair with that smug expression I'd learned to hate. "This house is too big for just you, Ruth. You rattle around here like a ghost. Maybe it's time for a change." "What kind of change?" "Crystal and I have been talking. Once the baby comes, we'll need more space. And well, you could find a nice little apartment somewhere. Downsize. It would be better for everyone." I set down my fork. "You want me to move out of my own house?" "Our house. And it makes sense. You'd be more comfortable somewhere smaller. And Crystal needs room for the nursery. The nursery. In the master bedroom. We've already discussed it." I looked at Crystal, who was examining her nails like she hadn't just stolen my bedroom and was now plotting to steal my house. I looked at Donald, who genuinely believed he had the power to throw me out of a home he'd never owned. "I see," I said. "When were you thinking this would happen?" "Within the month. I've already talked to a real estate agent. He thinks we could get a good price, split the proceeds. You'd have enough to buy a condo or something." "That's very generous of you, Donald." "I thought so." I picked up my fork and continued eating. 2 more days. That's all I needed. 2 more days of this performance. "Ruth?" Donald said. "You're not going to argue?" "What's the point? You've clearly made up your mind." He exchanged a glance with Crystal. The look on his face was pure triumph. "See?" he said. "I told you she'd be reasonable." That night, I lay in Jeremy's old bed and stared at the ceiling. The same ceiling my son had stared at for 18 years. The glow-in-the-dark stars we'd put up when he was 7 were still there, faded but visible. My phone buzzed. A text from Thomas Wright. "Final walkthrough confirmed for Sunday, 9 a.m. The Wrights are excited to see their new home." I typed back, "So am I." Tomorrow was day 6. The day before, everything changed. I needed to make sure every detail was perfect. I got out of bed and went to my suitcase. Inside, along with my clothes and the photo album, was a folder. The folder contained copies of every document Thomas had prepared. The deed transfer. The bank statements showing Donald's secret account was now empty. The divorce papers I planned to have served the following week. There was also a letter. A letter I'd written to Jeremy 3 months ago, when I'd first decided to take my life back. I'd told him everything. The plan, the reasons, the hope that someday we could be a family again, without Donald poisoning every gathering. Jeremy had written back. 1 line, but it was enough. "I'll be there on Sunday, Mom. I'm proud of you." I put the folder back in the suitcase and returned to bed. Outside, I could hear Donald snoring in what used to be our room. Crystal was probably sleeping beside him, dreaming of the life she thought she was going to have. They had no idea what was coming. And that was exactly how I wanted it. Day 6 began with Crystal demanding French toast. Not just any French toast, but the kind with powdered sugar and fresh berries, like she'd seen on some cooking show. "I don't have fresh berries," I said. "Then go get some." The baby needs vitamins. I looked at the clock. It was 7:15 in the morning. The nearest grocery store didn't open until 8. I'll go when the store opens, Crystal pouted. Actually pouted, like a child denied candy. But I'm hungry now. Then I'll make you regular French toast. You can have the berries later. Donald shuffled into the kitchen, still in his bathrobe. He poured himself coffee without acknowledging me. What's the problem? He asked Crystal. Your wife won't get me berries. Ruth, go get the berries. The store doesn't open for another 45 minutes. Then wait in the parking lot. Crystal is pregnant. She needs berries. I set down the spatula. Something in my expression must have changed because Donald took a step back. Fine, I said. I'll wait in the parking lot. I grabbed my purse and walked out the front door. The morning air was cool, the kind of crisp September morning I usually loved. I got in my car and drove toward the grocery store, but I didn't go to the grocery store. Instead, I drove to Helen's house. She was already awake, coffee brewing, like she'd been expecting me. Tomorrow's the day, I said. I know. How are you feeling? Like I might actually scream if Crystal asks for one more thing. Helen laughed. One more day. You can do one more day. We sat at her kitchen table, the same table where we'd had 1,000 conversations over 60 years. First days of school, broken hearts, weddings and funerals and everything in between. Helen had been there for all of it. What happens after Sunday? She asked. I go to the apartment I rented downtown, the one Thomas helped me find. I file for divorce. I start over. At 64? Better late than never. Helen reached across the table and took my hand. You know I'm proud of you, right? What you're doing takes courage. What I'm doing is surviving. I should have done it 20 years ago. Why didn't you? I thought about the question. Why hadn't I left Donald years ago, when the affairs started? When the lies piled up? When Jeremy stopped coming home for holidays because he couldn't stand to be in the same room as his father? Because I was afraid, I said. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of starting over. Afraid of what people would think. And now? Now I'm more afraid of dying in that house, waiting hand and foot on a man who never loved me, while his mistress sleeps in my bed. Helen squeezed my hand. Go get the berries. Give them one more perfect day. And tomorrow, you burn it all down. I went to the grocery store. I bought fresh strawberries, raspberries, and blueberries. I bought powdered sugar and real maple syrup. I bought everything Crystal could possibly want for her French toast. When I got home, Donald was on the phone again. This time I could hear the conversation clearly from the kitchen. She actually went to get the berries, he was saying. I told you she's completely broken. Does whatever she's told. That's not healthy, said the voice on the other end. Someone from his poker group, probably. It's convenient. Once we get rid of her, Crystal and I will have this whole place to ourselves. You're really going through with it? Kicking her out? Already talked to the lawyer. He says I can claim half the house in the divorce. With Crystal pregnant, the court will be sympathetic. Ruth will end up with nothing. I stood very still, the grocery bags in my hands. Donald thought he could take half my house, half of the house my parents had left me, half of the property that had been in my family for 3 generations. The lawyer he'd talked to was wrong, of course. The house was mine alone, had always been mine alone. Donald's name had never been on the deed, but he didn't know that. He'd never bothered to check. Let him believe what he wanted. Tomorrow would set him straight. I made the French toast. I arranged the berries in a perfect pattern. I dusted everything with powdered sugar and served it on the good china. This is perfect, Crystal said, eating like she hadn't seen food in days. You should have been a chef, Ruth. I was a wife. That was my career. Donald snorted. Some career. Yes, I said. Some career. The rest of the day passed in a blur of domestic servitude. I did laundry. I cleaned bathrooms. I made lunch and then dinner. I answered every demand with the same pleasant smile I'd been wearing all week. But inside, I was counting the hours. That evening, Crystal announced she wanted to go through my jewelry. Donald said you have some nice pieces, she said, following me to what used to be my bedroom, things you don't wear anymore. I suppose I have a few things. She sat on my bed, in my room, and watched as I opened the jewelry box that had belonged to my grandmother. Inside were the pearls my mother had worn on her wedding day. The diamond earrings Donald had given me for our anniversary, paid for with money I'd saved. The gold bracelet that was the last gift I'd received from my father before he died. "These are beautiful," Crystal said, reaching for the pearls. "Can I try them on?" I watched her clasp my mother's pearls around her neck. She admired herself in the mirror, turning this way and that. "They look good on me, don't they? They look very nice. I think I should keep them. For the baby. Something old for the christening." "The christening?" "Donald wants to have the baby christened at his family's church, the one where you got married." She laughed. "Isn't that funny? Getting married in the same place your husband's wife got married?" I didn't say anything. I couldn't. If I opened my mouth, 44 years of silent rage would come pouring out, and I needed to stay quiet for just one more day. "You can have the pearls," I said finally. "Consider them a gift." Crystal beamed. "Really? Thank you so much, Ruth. You're so generous." "I'm just a Christian," I said, doing the Christian thing. That night I slept poorly, not because of nerves, but because of anticipation. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, everything would change. The life I'd known for 44 years would end, and something new would begin. I thought about Jeremy. He'd said he would be there. For the first time in 5 years, I would see my son. Not at some awkward family gathering with Donald hovering in the background, but at the moment of my liberation. I thought about the apartment downtown. Small, but mine. A kitchen where I would cook for myself. A bedroom where I would sleep alone by choice, not by exile. A life that belonged to me. I thought about Donald and Crystal, standing in the living room tomorrow morning, realizing that the house was no longer theirs, realizing that the money was gone, realizing that the weak, broken woman they'd been mocking all week had outsmarted them both. It was almost enough to make me smile. At 3 in the morning, I got out of bed and went to the window. The street was quiet. The neighborhood was dark. Everything looked exactly the same as it had for 40 years. But tomorrow, I would walk out of this house and never come back. Tomorrow, I would be free. I went back to bed and closed my eyes. When I opened them again, it was 7 o'clock, day 7, the last day of my old life. I got dressed carefully, in the outfit I'd chosen weeks ago. A simple blue dress, comfortable shoes, my hair pinned back the way I'd worn it for decades. I looked like myself, like Ruth Coleman, devoted wife and mother. But underneath, in the suitcase by the door, was everything I needed for my new life. And in less than 2 hours, the whole world would see who Ruth Coleman really was. I went downstairs to make coffee, the last pot of coffee I would ever make in this kitchen. The first step toward everything else. The coffee was brewing when Donald came downstairs. He was still in his pajamas, hair disheveled, yawning like he hadn't slept well. Good. I hoped he'd tossed and turned all night. "You're up early," he said. "I have a lot to do today." "Like what?" "You'll see." He gave me a suspicious look but didn't press further. Crystal appeared a few minutes later, wearing one of my robes, her hair wrapped in a towel. She looked at me with the casual contempt I'd grown used to over the past week. "Is breakfast ready?" "I made coffee. Help yourself to cereal." "Cereal? But you always make a hot breakfast." "Not today. I have company coming." Donald's head snapped up. "Company? What company?" "The new owners of this house." The words hung in the air. Donald stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. Crystal stopped mid-reach for the coffee pot. "What did you say?" Donald asked. "I said the new owners are coming to see their new house. They should be here around 9. "Ruth, what the hell are you talking about?" I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd served thousands of meals, the same table where I'd watched Donald eat my food while lying to my face. 3 months ago, I said, I hired a lawyer, Thomas Wright. He helped me do something I should have done years ago. "What?" "I sold the house," Donald laughed. The sound was harsh and dismissive. "You can't sell the house." It's our house. It's my house. It's always been my house. My parents left it to me when they died. Your name has never been on the deed. That's not possible. Would you like to see the paperwork? I reached into my pocket and pulled out the deed. The original deed, the one that had been in my family for 3 generations. I unfolded it and laid it on the table. Right there, I said, pointing. Ruth Marie Palmer, that was my maiden name. And there, I pointed to another line. The date it was transferred to me, 1985, 1 year before our wedding. Donald grabbed the paper. His eyes scanned it frantically, looking for some mistake, some loophole. This doesn't mean anything. We've been married 44 years. Half of everything is mine. Half of what you earned, maybe. Not half of what I inherited. Indiana law is very clear about that. You're lying. I'm not lying, Donald. I'm telling you the truth for the first time in 44 years. Crystal had gone pale. She looked from me to Donald to the deed on the table. Don, what is she saying? She's crazy. This is some kind of trick. It's not a trick. The house has been sold. The closing happened 2 weeks ago. The money, $425,000, is in an account with my name on it, and the new owners are arriving in about an hour to move in. Donald stood up so fast his chair fell over. You can't do this. I won't allow it. You don't have any say in the matter. This is my house. I can do whatever I want with it. Where am I supposed to go? I don't care. A hotel. Your brother's place. The street. It's not my problem anymore. Ruth, I am your husband. You can't just throw me out. Watch me. The doorbell rang at exactly 8:47. I checked my phone one more time, saw the text from Thomas confirming he was on his way with the rights, and walked to the front door. Through the window, I could see a minivan in the driveway. A man and woman were helping 2 teenagers unload suitcases. Normal people. A normal family. Coming to start their new life in a house I was finally ready to leave behind. I opened the door. Mrs. Coleman? The man extended his hand. I'm Stephen Wright, Thomas's brother. This is my wife, Linda, and our kids, Emma and Michael. Welcome to your new home. Behind me, I heard Donald's heavy footsteps. He appeared in the doorway, his face red with anger. Who the hell are you? Coleman, I presume. Stephen's voice was calm and professional. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. I have the signed deed, the closing documents, and confirmation of the wire transfer. Everything is in order. I don't care what documents you have. This is my house. Actually, sir, according to these records, this house belonged to your wife, and as of 2 weeks ago, it belongs to me and my family. Thomas Wright's car pulled up behind the minivan. He got out, straightened his tie, and walked up the path with the confidence of a man who'd been preparing for this moment for months. Good morning, Mrs. Coleman. Good morning, Mr. Coleman. He nodded at Donald. I'm Thomas Wright, Mrs. Coleman's attorney. I'm here to ensure the transfer of property goes smoothly. There's not going to be any transfer, Donald said. This is fraud. I'm calling the police. Please do. They'll be happy to explain property law to you. Specifically, how a deed that's been in your wife's family since 1952 cannot be contested by a spouse who was never listed on it. Donald pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely dial. 911? Yes, I need police at 147 Maple Street. Someone is trying to steal my house. I watched him pace in the front yard, shouting into the phone. Crystal had appeared behind me, her face a mask of confusion and fear. What's happening? She asked. What's happening is that Donald's fantasy is over. He thought he could bring you here, humiliate me, and then take my house. He was wrong. But where will we go? I don't care where you go. That's not my problem. I'm pregnant. You can't just throw a pregnant woman out on the street. Funny. A week ago, you were trying to throw me out on the street. How does it feel to be on the other side? The police arrived 15 minutes later. 2 officers, one young and one older, both looking tired and confused about why they'd been called to a property dispute on a Sunday morning. Donald met them on the lawn, gesturing wildly, pointing at me and the Wrights and Thomas. These people are trying to steal my house. Arrest them. The older officer looked at the documents Thomas provided. He looked at the deed. He looked at Donald. Sir, according to these papers, your wife sold this property 2 weeks ago. The sale appears to be legal. But it's my house. I've lived here for 40 years. Living somewhere doesn't make you the owner, sir. Your name isn't on the deed. It never was. Donald turned to me, his face twisted with rage. Ruth, tell them. Tell them this is a mistake. I walked forward until I was standing directly in front of my husband. The man I'd married at 20 years old. The man who'd spent 4 decades lying to me, cheating on me, taking me for granted. There's no mistake, Donald. I planned this. Every detail, every step, for the past 3 months. While you were bringing your mistress into my home, while you were laughing at me with your friends, while you were planning to take everything I had, I was taking it back. You can't do this. It's already done. I turned to the older officer. What are my options here? They have until noon to vacate, correct? Yes, ma'am. If the sale is legal, and it appears to be, the previous residents have until the time specified in the contract. And if they refuse to leave, then we can assist with removal. I looked back at Donald, at Crystal, clutching her belly like it would protect her, at the house that had been my prison for 44 years. You have until noon, I said. I suggest you start packing. Thomas touched my elbow. Mrs. Coleman, there's someone here to see you. I turned. A car I didn't recognize had pulled up to the curb, and standing beside it, taller than I remembered, thinner than I expected, was my son, Jeremy. He was here, just like he'd promised. I walked toward him, my legs shaking, my heart pounding. He met me halfway, and for the first time in 5 years, my son wrapped his arms around me. I'm proud of you, Mom, he whispered. I'm so proud of you. Behind us, I heard Donald shouting. Crystal was crying. The police officers were explaining, again, that this was a civil matter and they couldn't arrest anyone for selling their own property. But I didn't care about any of that. I was in my son's arms, and for the first time in decades, I was exactly where I belonged. Jeremy and I sat in his car while the chaos unfolded on the lawn. Through the windshield, I could see Donald arguing with the police officers, his arms flailing, his face purple with rage. When did you start planning this? Jeremy asked. 3 months ago, when I found out about Crystal. How did you find out? I found a receipt in his jacket, a jewelry store in Nashville, the pearl earrings he gave her. I knew they weren't for me, because he hasn't bought me jewelry in 15 years. Jeremy nodded slowly. And you just started planning? I called Helen first. She'd been telling me for years that I should leave him. I always made excuses. The house, the marriage, what people would think. But when I saw that receipt, something broke inside me. Good. It's about time something broke. I looked at my son. He had his father's eyes, but nothing else. Everything good about Jeremy came from somewhere else. Some well of decency that Donald had never possessed. I'm sorry, I said. For staying so long. For making you grow up in that house. Mom, you don't have to apologize. Yes, I do. I knew what he was. I knew about the affairs, the lies, the way he treated people. I stayed anyway, and I let you see all of it. That was wrong. Jeremy was quiet for a long moment. On the lawn, one of the police officers was now physically restraining Donald from approaching the Wrights' minivan. When I was 15, Jeremy said, I found one of Dad's phones, the secret one he kept for his girlfriends. I saw the messages, the pictures, all of it. Why didn't you tell me? Because I thought you knew. I thought you'd made peace with it somehow. And then, when I got older, I thought maybe you didn't have anywhere else to go, that he'd trapped you financially. He thought he had. He didn't know about the house. He didn't know about any of it. You were smarter than him the whole time. I was more patient. There's a difference. A knock on the window made us both jump. It was Crystal, her face streaked with mascara, her eyes wild. Please, she said through the glass. You have to help me. I don't have anywhere to go. I rolled down the window. That's not my problem. I'm pregnant, with Donald's baby. You can't just abandon us. Watch me. Ruth, please. I know what I did was wrong. I know I shouldn't have come here. But I didn't have a choice. Donald said you'd understand. He said you were a good Christian woman. I am a good Christian woman. I've been turning the other cheek for 44 years. But even Jesus threw the money changers out of the temple. Crystal started crying harder. Her hands pressed against her belly in that protective gesture pregnant women make. The baby isn't Donald's, she said suddenly. I stared at her. What? I lied. The baby isn't his. I don't even know who the father is. Could be one of 3 guys. I picked Donald because he seemed like he had money. I thought if I could just get established here, get my name on some bank accounts, I could make a life for me and the baby. So this whole thing was a con. I'm not proud of it, but I didn't have any other options. I should have felt vindicated. Angry, maybe, that I'd spent a week serving a woman who was lying the whole time. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Pity. How old are you really? I asked. 29. That part was true. And where's your family? Dead. My mom died when I was 12. I was in foster care until I aged out. I've been on my own ever since. I looked at this woman, this girl really, who had stumbled into my life and helped set off the chain of events that led to my freedom. She was a con artist, yes, but she was also alone, pregnant, and about to be homeless because the man she'd targeted turned out to have nothing. There's a shelter downtown, I said. The Methodist Church runs it. They help pregnant women, no questions asked. A shelter? It's better than the street. And they have resources, job placement, housing assistance. If you're willing to work for it, you can build something. Crystal wiped her eyes. Why are you helping me? After everything I did? Because holding on to anger is exhausting, and because I'm starting a new life today. I'd like to start it by doing something decent, even for someone who doesn't deserve it. I gave her the address. She wrote it on her hand, thanked me without making eye contact, and walked away toward the bus stop at the corner. That was generous, Jeremy said. That was practical. If she ends up on the street, Donald will find her and use her as a weapon against me. Better to point her somewhere useful. Mom, you've gotten calculating. I've always been calculating. I just never let anyone see it. By 11 o'clock, Donald had exhausted himself. He sat on the front steps of the house that was no longer his, head in his hands, while the Wrights waited patiently by their minivan. I got out of Jeremy's car and walked toward him. He looked up, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw fear in his eyes. Ruth, please, can we talk? There's nothing to talk about. 44 years. Doesn't that mean anything? It means 44 years of lies. 44 years of betrayal. 44 years of being treated like a servant in my own home. I made mistakes, I admit it. But I can change. We can work on our marriage. See a counselor. Our marriage ended a long time ago, Donald. I just didn't have the strength to admit it until now. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know. Your brother's house. A hotel. There's a homeless shelter downtown, too. I hear they're very helpful. You're enjoying this. I'm not enjoying anything. I'm just tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of waiting. Tired of being married to a man who never loved me. Donald's face contorted. I loved you. In my way. Your way wasn't enough. Your way was lying and cheating and bringing another woman into my bed. That's not love. That's control. And this? Selling the house out from under me? Taking the money? That's love? That's survival. The difference is, I'm not pretending it's something else. Thomas approached with a clipboard. Coleman, it's 11:15. You have 45 minutes to collect your belongings. Anything left in the house after noon becomes the property of the new owners. Donald looked at the house. 44 years of memories behind those walls. 44 years of a life that was ending. I can't pack a whole life in 45 minutes. Then I suggest you focus on the essentials. He went inside. I watched through the window as he moved from room to room, throwing things into boxes, shoving clothes into garbage bags. He moved like a man in a daze, unable to process what was happening. Jeremy came to stand beside me. How do you feel? Free. For the first time in my adult life, I feel free. What's next? I have an apartment downtown. Thomas helped me find it. small, but it's mine. Nobody's name on the lease but mine. Nobody's expectations but mine. And the money from the house? In an account with my name on it, along with the $127,000 I took from Donald's secret savings account. Jeremy laughed. He had a secret savings account? He thought he did. He didn't know I'd been watching for 20 years. When Thomas told me what I was entitled to in a divorce, I decided to take it preemptively. Is that legal? It's a joint marital asset, taken before the divorce filing. Completely legal. Morally questionable, maybe, but so is cheating on your wife for 40 years. At noon, Donald emerged from the house with 2 suitcases and a box. Everything he owned, after 44 years, fit in the back of a taxi. He walked past me without a word, but at the curb, he stopped and turned back. "You ruined my life," he said. "No, Donald. You ruined your life. I just stopped saving you from the consequences." The taxi pulled away. I watched it disappear around the corner, carrying my husband, my past, my chains. Then I turned to face the future. The Wrights were already unloading their minivan. Their teenagers were arguing about who got which bedroom. Linda was making plans for the garden. Stephen was checking the gutters. A normal family, starting a new chapter. Just like me. "Ready to go?" Jeremy asked. More than ready. We got in his car and drove away. I didn't look back at the house. There was nothing there I needed anymore. Everything important was sitting beside me, or waiting in an apartment downtown, or growing in a heart that was finally learning how to hope. I was 64 years old, and my life was just beginning. The apartment was on the 4th floor of a building downtown with a view of the Tennessee River. It was small, just 1 bedroom, but it had good light and a balcony where I could drink my coffee in the morning. Jeremy helped me carry in my suitcases. There wasn't much. The clothes I'd packed in secret. The jewelry that had been my mother's and grandmother's. The photo albums from before Donald, from a time when I still believed in fairy tales. "It's nice," Jeremy said, looking around. "Cozy. It's mine. That's what matters." We ordered pizza and sat on the floor because I hadn't bought furniture yet. The walls were bare. The kitchen was empty except for a coffee maker I'd picked up on the way. It looked like the apartment of someone just starting out in life, not someone who was 64 years old. "What are you going to do now?" Jeremy asked. "I don't know. For the first time in 44 years, I don't have anyone else's schedule to follow. No meals to make, no demands to meet, no lies to pretend I believe. That sounds lonely. It sounds peaceful. I've had enough excitement for a lifetime." Jeremy set down his pizza. "Mom, I want to apologize for staying away so long, for not being there when you needed me. You were protecting yourself. I understand that. But I left you alone with him, knowing what he was. You couldn't save me, Jeremy. I had to save myself. And I had to do it in my own time, in my own way. The way you did it was pretty spectacular." I smiled. "I had help. Thomas, Helen, and you for being willing to be there at the end. I wouldn't have missed it for anything." We finished the pizza, and Jeremy helped me unpack what little I had. By evening, the apartment looked almost like someone lived there. A few books on the shelf, a plant Helen had given me as a housewarming gift, the coffee maker on the counter, ready for morning. "I should go," Jeremy said. "Let you get settled. Will you come back? For dinner sometime?" Try and stop me. He hugged me at the door, longer and harder than he had in years. When he pulled away, there were tears in his eyes. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything." After he left, I stood on the balcony and watched the sun set over the river. The sky turned orange, then pink, then a deep purple that faded into night. The city lights came on, twinkling like earthbound stars. I thought about Donald, alone in some hotel room or on his brother's couch, trying to figure out how his life had fallen apart in a single morning. I wondered if he'd learned anything. Probably not. Men like Donald never did. I thought about Crystal, hopefully safe in the shelter, beginning her own journey toward something better. She'd made bad choices, but she was young. There was still time for her to change. I thought about the house on Maple Street, The house where I'd spent 44 years being invisible. The Wrights were probably unpacking now, filling the rooms with their own memories. The ghost of Ruth Coleman would fade quickly. Within a year, no one would remember I'd ever lived there. And that was exactly what I wanted. The next few weeks passed in a blur of small pleasures. I bought furniture, I hung curtains, I learned to cook for one, which was both simpler and lonelier than I'd expected. Helen came by every few days. We'd sit on my balcony with coffee and watch the boats on the river. She told me the gossip from church, from the neighborhood, from everywhere I used to belong. "Donald's been telling everyone you stole from him," she said one afternoon. "He says you manipulated the lawyer, forged documents, all kinds of nonsense. Let him talk. The documents are legal." Thomas made sure of that. Some people believe him, the poker group mostly, but most people have figured out he's lying. It doesn't matter what people believe. I'm done caring about what people think. That's new for you. That's freedom. Thomas stopped by with the final paperwork. The divorce petition had been filed. Donald had 30 days to respond. "He's hired a lawyer," Thomas said. "Someone from his poker group. Not very good from what I hear." "What does he want?" "Half of everything. The house proceeds, the money from the joint account, your pension." "Can he get it?" "The house was your separate property. That's not negotiable." "The joint account is trickier, but since you took it before filing, it's technically still marital assets. A judge might order some returned." "And if I'd already spent it?" Thomas smiled. "That would be a problem for a judge to figure out. But I'd recommend keeping good records of where the money went." I'd already thought about that. Some of the money had gone to Jeremy, to help with his mortgage. Some had gone to Helen's granddaughter's college fund. Some had gone to the Methodist shelter where I'd sent Crystal. And some was sitting in an investment account, growing slowly, building a future I'd never dared to imagine. "Whatever happens," I said, "it's worth it. Every penny, every complication. It's worth it to be free." I thought you'd say that. 1 month after the 7th day, I got a phone call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe to accept. "Mrs. Coleman? This is Crystal." I sat down on my new couch. "Hello, Crystal. I wanted to thank you for telling me about the shelter. They've been really good to me. I'm glad. I got a job at a restaurant downtown. It's not much, but it's honest work." "That's a start." There was a pause. I could hear traffic in the background, street sounds, the noise of a city going about its business. "I also wanted to apologize," Crystal said. "For everything. For coming to your house. For lying about the baby. For being part of what Donald did to you." "The baby? Was any of that true?" "I am pregnant. That part was real. But it's not Donald's. The father is a guy I dated last year. He doesn't want anything to do with us. And what are you going to do? Keep it. The shelter has a program for new mothers. They'll help me find an apartment, get childcare, build a life. It's going to be hard, but I've done hard before." I thought about this girl, this woman, who had walked into my life as an enemy and was calling now as something else. Not a friend, but not an enemy either. "Crystal, I'm going to give you some advice. Take it or leave it. Okay. Stop looking for someone to save you. Stop looking for men with money or houses or promises. The only person who can save you is yourself. Learn a skill. Build a career. Make yourself valuable to the world, not to some man who'll throw you away when he's done." That's what you did? That's what I should have done 44 years ago. Instead, I spent half my life being invisible. Don't make my mistake. I won't, I promise. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony and watched the boats on the river. The sun was setting again, painting the sky in colors I was learning to love. 44 years. That's how long I'd been Donald Coleman's wife. 44 years of cooking and cleaning and pretending not to notice the lies. 44 years of being invisible, expendable, taken for granted. Now I was Ruth Palmer again. The name I was born with. The name on the deed that had set me free. I was 64 years old. I had an apartment with a view of the river. I had a son who loved me. I had a best friend who'd stood by me for 60 years. I had money in the bank and time to spend it. Most importantly, I had myself. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Donald got nothing. His lawyer had tried every trick in the book, but Thomas was better. The house was mine, the money was mine, and the future was mine. I never saw Donald again. I heard he'd moved to Florida, to his brother's place, to start over. I didn't care. He was part of a life that was over now. Jeremy came for dinner every Sunday. We talked about his work, his life, his hopes for the future. Sometimes he brought his girlfriend, a nice woman named Sarah who laughed easily and treated me like family. Helen and I started a book club. Just the two of us at first, then a few other women from church, then a few more. We met at my apartment every Thursday, drinking wine and arguing about novels. And every morning, I sat on my balcony with my coffee and watched the sun rise over the river. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was free. On my 65th birthday, Jeremy gave me a card. Inside, he'd written, "To the strongest woman I know. You waited until the 7th day, and then you rose. Happy birthday, Mom. I love you." I kept that card on my refrigerator, where I could see it every day. A reminder of what I'd survived, a promise of what was still to come, and a celebration of the woman I'd finally become. Ruth Palmer, survivor, free.